Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2008 action thriller Exit Speed. Now, I have to be honest with this one. I expected this to be pretty poor, based on the cover art, based on the fact that it's a direct-to-video movie that was made on the cheap, starring a bunch of actors past their prime, or actors who didn't really have much of a prime to begin with. But it wasn't really that bad. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on the film, I would like to give a special shout out to Mark for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Exit Speed is directed by Scott Ziehl, and Scott Ziehl, he's a director that I'm a little familiar with because he directed Earth versus the Spider in 2001, and that's a film that I don't mind. And he also did Roadhouse 2. That's a film I don't like. So this is a director who's done some things before that I'm familiar with. He's not like a great director by any means, but he's a serviceable filmmaker. Is one of those directors who is, in a lot of ways, kind of dime a dozen, but at least he's not totally incompetent and awful at his job like a lot of these other direct-to-video, direct-to-streaming filmmakers who have, honestly, a much longer filmography. And I would say he's at his best when it comes to some of the action sequences involving shotgun blasts or gunfire or scenes involving a potato gun or arrows. But other than those kind of sequences or stuff with the biker gang, the direction at points definitely looks like TV movie of the week stuff in terms of the framing, in terms of the shot selection, in terms of the way that he utilizes the camera when it comes to the movement. And yeah, it's not a technically tremendous production by any means from a directorial standpoint, but it's decent, it's effective, it works. It's not something that's glaringly bad or glaringly awful at any point. So, considering the really low budget, and considering a lot of the limitations that he was working with, the direction turns out to be not half bad. The screenplay by Michael Stokes, though, for me personally, other than some of the performances by the cast, is this film's biggest strength. This script had a lot of things that happened in it that I did not honestly see coming. So I give the screenwriter a lot of credit for having a good amount of twists and turns when it comes to how certain characters reveal extra added depth, and also when it comes to how these characters ultimately suffer their demise. And I also appreciate the old school simplicity of the plot. In a lot of ways, is a throwback to stuff like Rio Bravo or Assault on Precinct 13, where you have a group of people and they're stranded in a certain location and they're trapped and they have to fend for themselves against a bunch of gang members or a group of criminals. In this film's instance, it's a group of nomads, this a biker gang, and so it's not anything that reinvents the wheel, reinvents the genre, or anything of that sort, but sometimes that simplicity is something that is really quite good. And I feel that this screenplay is one of those things where, yeah, it's simple. It has a lot of stuff with these villains, the biker gang, where they don't really have much in terms of distinct personalities. and they don't really say any lines of dialogue. There's no depth to them whatsoever. But that's a very similar thing to what happened in Assault on Precinct 13. And I don't think this is on the same level as that film was in terms of its script, but it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be for sure because of the fact that yeah, the strength of the characters is pretty good. All these characters have a decent amount of depth. They're written in ways that are somewhat realistic. They don't really come across like they're just varying different versions of the same character. So there's a lot of things about them that helps them stand out. They're not unlikable for the most part. I mean, the coach guy has some moments where he gets a little irritating because he's just being an asshole, but there's some moments later on where he sort of makes up for that. And I just feel that the way that people interacted with one another was pretty dynamic. There were even some fun little one-liners at points and bits of banter between characters. And overall, yeah, I do think it's a pretty good script. It even has a relatively happy ending, despite the fact that there still was a lot of people who were on that bus who wound up losing their lives. But it isn't one of those things where pretty much everybody dies in the end. There are still a decent amount of survivors, and even the subplot about this woman who's gone AWOL from the army and Meredith, involving this this sergeant named Sergeant Sparks, who's trying to find her so he can, hand her over to the military police so she can serve her sentencing for going AWOL and being a deserter. Even that whole subplot has a relatively happy ending. That's kind of unexpected in a movie like this. You're almost expecting her to just, yeah, I I made my bed and now I'm gonna have to lie in it, and I'll go to prison. I'll serve my time for being a deserter. But that's not actually what happens. Instead, she's allowed to go on the run again. But this time she has some help and she's not on her own. The whole stuff involving the people on the bus being attacked by these bikers, I think some people might find it to be a bit incredulous and over the top in terms of just how determined these bikers were to take over this bus and kill everybody. But biker gangs and gangs in general, like if you kill one of their own, they are pretty vindictive. So I didn't necessarily find that to be that far fetched, but I do have to admit, I don't know why they decided to mess with the bus. I guess they were bored or something. I don't know, because they don't really rob anybody. They don't rob anything from anyone. They just shoot the bus and chase after the bus and in essence, they're just like messing with them. And then what happens is the bus then runs over a couple of the bikers, and now the bikers want blood. And so you have some of the people on the bus actually try to stop the bikers, and that doesn't end well because it ends in more gunfire and more people dying, including the bus driver who actually stopped to try to check on the motorcycle punks that he ran over. And for his trouble, he gets shot in the head. Speaking of that, I'll give the script some credit too for how vicious and violent it is at points. Like, it's definitely rated R. Like, people get shot and there's blood squibs. There's at least a couple headshots. There's scenes where people get shot into the back of the head with a bow and arrow, or with an arrow. Really, it's not the bow and arrow, but you get what I mean. And one guy gets his throat slit. So yeah, there's definitely some edge to it when it comes to the violence, which definitely does help the suspense. And all I gotta say is if you're the bus driver, if you're the one that decides to drive the bus in this movie, you are screwed. Because not only what did the original bus driver get killed, so did the guy who decided to take over and drive the bus after him. And eventually they wind up in a junkyard, because the bus winds up crashing there, and the remaining survivors, they have more moments of character bonding, and you get to know more about the characters. And the cast of characters is pretty diverse. Like you have Desmond Harrington's character Sam Cutter, who's this. They don't really explicitly say that he's an ex-con, but you could kind of get a little bit of a vibe of that. But he's definitely a guy who's a bit of a flake. He he has a son, but he's been a deadbeat dad and hasn't been a part of his life. But you can see him trying to be a better father. He's trying to get to his son just in time for Christmas. Um, and by the way, this is a holiday film. I don't necessarily feel it had to be, but it's not something that's particularly that distracting either. But yeah, you have Sam, you have Maudie, who is a single mom, who's also a breast cancer survivor and a marathon runner. You've got Julie, Mond's character, Meredith, who's the woman from the military that went AWOL. You've got Annabelle, who's a LARPer of all things, who was on her way to a LARP event where she was going to be a dark elf, and she's proficient at archery and sketching. She does a good job of sketching faces. And you also have Sergeant Sparks, who is the guy from the military who's trying to find and arrest Meredith. You have this coach named Coach Jerry Yarbrough, who was fired from his job as a coach at this high school because he abused a student, uh, and he has some serious anger issues. You also have Danny Gunn, who's the bus driver, uh, who actually also served some time in Afghanistan as a delivery driver. You have a couple of characters who are romantically involved with one another, Desiree and Duke. You have this Hispanic man named Ramon who doesn't speak English but is really good with his hands. You have some other people as well, like Walter and Joey. I believe Walter was like one of the guys who, uh, I think he was the guy who took over for the original bus driver and then died in the bus crash. And then there's a couple other people involved with the cast as well. And you have a bunch of pretty much no name actors, no name characters playing the biker gang. So that's your cast of characters, and throughout the script, you get a lot of depth that's provided to them, which I really liked. It made them feel fleshed out as characters, and honestly made this film a lot better than it honestly had any right being, considering the fact that it does have a pretty at least at the time, a kind of generic plot. It also has a very low budget, but the writing for the characters is quite strong, and it's a lot better than people give it credit for when it comes to other people who have done critiques of this film. Like I said, the action when it is there, it's pretty vicious and violent and effective. And There are some moments where it's a bit slow paced, but I still feel that it was still relatively engaging because of the fact that even in those moments, you still had bits of character development to keep you interested. And like I said, I like the ending. I like the fact that this group of people, they team up and they work together, sometimes reluctantly, but they work together and they manage to overcome the odds for the most part. Some of them don't make it, but a lot of them do, and they get their chances to shine and kick some ass and take some names. And I like the arc for Maudie, where she gets to stand up for herself and gets to, in her own way, be a hero, and gets the help of the army sergeant Sparks, and they show up at the end and help out during the finale because she went on the run. Um Deliberately because she's a marathon runner. So the plan is that she could get out of the junkyard and run to the next town to try to get help. But it turns out that next town is actually where the bikers have their hangout. And so that's not even safe for her. And there's also a biker chick who's been following her the entire time. So she has to try to find a way to take out that biker chick. So there's a lot of moments in this script that are full of some actual genuine tension. So yeah, I definitely feel it's a pretty good script. It's a pretty solid screenplay for the most part. The cast I also think is pretty solid. Desmond Harrington as Sam Cotter. I felt he was pretty charismatic. I felt it was a pretty good performance by him. Even had a fun little one liner later on when this one guy who was a part of the initial gang that attacked the bus, who then left to try to get reinforcements, he comes back. And then Desmond Harrington has a shotgun. He's like, "You should have never come back," and then shoots him. I like that. Lea Thompson as Maudie. This is honestly one of her better performances as an actress. She even gets a moment where she gets to tell off the coach who's being an asshole and tells him to shut the fuck up, which was a crowd pleasing moment. And yeah, she shows a lot of emotion with her role, and there's a lot of nuance and layers to it. It was a really good performance by Lea Thompson. Julie Mond was also pretty decent as Meredith, especially when she's got the shotgun and blowing people away. Alice Greczyn as Annabelle, the LARPer. I didn't mind her either. It was also a role that showed some nuance and layers because there are moments where she's breaking down and is emotional over having taken a life with her arrows. And I felt that she had some good chemistry romantically with Desmond Harrington. I felt they made a good pair. Fred Ward, he's as fun as always as Sergeant Sparks. He's not in it a lot, but he makes the most out of his screen time. You know, he's commenting on how eggnog gives him gas. He's just he's a lot of fun, and I definitely do enjoy his presence and his performance in this film. You've got Gregory Jabara who plays the coach. I mean, the character is kind of a difficult role because the guy's a jerk off, but there are some moments later on where he's able to show a more, let's just say, a more positive side of this character. So I think it was a good performance overall because he showed both sides of the character pretty effectively. You have David Rest Snell, who plays Danny Gunn. He's only in it for a little bit, but he makes enough of an impression on you, and when it comes to his chemistry with Julie Mond and just how he's able to play what is seemingly a genuinely good guy, that when he gets shot, you actually feel something. So I got to give him a lot of credit, despite him only being in it for like maybe 5 minutes, if even that. Kelly Dawn Hancock as Desiree and Nick Soul as Duke. They were fine. but they weren't particularly great by any means, but they were fine when it comes to their performances. I enjoyed Everett Cifuentes as Ramon. He actually had a sense of humor that I also liked when it comes to his take on the character. And the rest of the cast, like Wally White as Walter and Daniel Beecham as Joey, like they were just they were decent for what they were asked to do. But really the main cast is the ones that have the most screen time, and they're the ones that deliver the best performances. Desmond Harrington, Lea Thompson, Julie Mond, Alice Greczyn, Fred Ward, Gregory Jabara, and you do have different people who play the bikers, but there's no recognizable names. Uh, One of them though reminded me of Bobcat Goldthwait from one of the Police Academy sequels. But other than that guy, no one really stood out that much when it comes to their appearance or their performance. I well, I would say the guy who was doing a stunt on the bike where he's standing on the bike while it's still going. I felt that was definitely something that stood out. It was a pretty good looking stunt, but the character you played really didn't stand out that much. Now, the cinematography by Thomas L. Calloway, it's all right for a low budget movie. Same thing goes for the editing by Matt Coleman. The music by Cole Freeman, though, I didn't care for. It sounded like something that would have been in a Hallmark movie. It just didn't fit the overall vibe and feel of the film very well. And neither did the opening credit song. It sounded like some poor man's REM, and I don't know why it was featured in the movie. It just starts the film off on a bit of a flat tire, but thankfully, the tire doesn't stay flat for that long. It gets refilled or gets replaced pretty quickly, so the awkward opening credits don't necessarily derail the movie that much. And overall, I thought it was a decent film. I thought it was pretty uh, uh, s- solid for what it is. I mean, I give it a lot of extra leeway considering it's a low budget, direct to video, direct to streaming production. When you can be at least average in a lot of categories, I'm going to give you some extra marks. So I honestly think this was above average because of the fact that it had a pretty quality script, had some good performances by the cast, and yeah, I would say if it at all interests you, and maybe if you want to switch things up during the holiday season this year and you want to watch a different, relatively unknown holiday movie, for Christmas, this might be one worth checking out. I was very pleasantly surprised by it. It didn't make me want to head for the exits, which I honestly thought it was going to. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Exit Speed, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.